Hey friends, welcome back to Witch Church. It's Mal. I'm so excited because we finally have arrived at the second installment of my Asteroid episodes. And I was lucky enough to have astrologer Louise Edington on today's episode to help me discuss Asteroid Ceres, or as Louise prefers to categorize Ceres, dwarf planet Ceres, but however you prefer to categorize this rock in the asteroid belt. Ceres is such an awesome asteroid. There's so much rich meaning to their mythology and archetypal story. You're actually probably already a little bit familiar with Ceres. If you've ever heard of the Greek goddess Demeter, Ceres is the Roman equivalent to Demeter. And Demeter is the goddess of the grain and the goddess of the harvest. And you may be partially familiar with the mythology surrounding Demeter, which has something to do with Demeter's brother Hades and her daughter Persephone. So I'll save that mythology for the episode. Actually, Louise will use her Sagittarius stellium and tell us a really magical story about how we can retell the story of Ceres, but you're probably, again, already familiar with some of the mythology of this asteroid. And although Ceres does relate to themes like the harvest and agriculture and growing crops and our connection to nature, Louise and I will also explore the deeper, maybe darker sides of this asteroid. Ceres also may have a lot to do with death, grief, mourning, the loss of innocence, and also on a psychological level, we can have many discussions about Ceres in a natal chart, perhaps relating to the psychology between mother and child, especially the relationship between mother and daughter, and all of like the subtle nuances that can exist within that dynamic, right? So Ceres is just loaded with a bunch of different themes. We also talked about Ceres and this asteroid's connection with plant medicine. Of course, we took some time to discuss the Industrial Revolution and maybe what Ceres has to do with the fall of capitalism. So there's just so many themes that this asteroid can speak to. I would love to know where Ceres is in your own natal chart. So you can either DM me on Instagram, or if you're watching on YouTube, comment below and let me and Louise know. Where is your Ceres placement in your natal chart? And did you relate to any of these themes that we are going to discuss in this episode? I would love to know. And before we get into the interview, I just want to more formally introduce you to Louise. So Louise Edington has been studying and practicing astrology as an interest for over 30 years and works professionally as an evolutionary astrologer. And she's been working as a professional astrologer since 2012. Known as the Cosmic Owl of Cosmic Owl Astrology, Louise loves to combine all her passions as an astrologer, writer, shamanic healer, and certified hypnotherapy and past life regression therapist. Louise helps clients regain a deep connection with the cycles of the universe so that they can create an extraordinary life experience. So definitely give Louise a follow on social media. I'll have all of her info linked below. Also, Louise is hosting a Venus retrograde class later this year, so definitely check that class out. She mentions that at the end. And we're also lucky enough to have an Amazon best-selling author on the podcast today because one of Louise's astrology books is actually #1 in the astrology section of Amazon. So we definitely have a treat here today, and I'm really lucky that I met Louise in some classes that we've taken together through OPA. And she's just such a great resource. She's been a great peer to learn from, and she has so much deep esoteric Sagittarian knowledge. So definitely take this opportunity to learn from her and enjoy this second installment of my Asteroid episodes. Okay, Louise. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you about this asteroid, which I know we both have prominent Ceres placements in our chart, but maybe for some of the listeners who don't know you yet, do you want to tell us maybe a little bit about your current astrological work and your astrological practice and kind of what you're up to lately?
Well, I'm always so busy, but I've been working as a professional astrologer since 2012, and became interested in Ceres when I read Demetra George's amazing book on the asteroid goddesses, of course. But the first thing I'll say is I know you're doing a series on the asteroids, but she's a dwarf planet.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Not that it really matters, to my mind. They're astronomical terms. Their effect is still the same. But, gradually over the years, I started to notice that Ceres, was really active, and it developed more over the last couple of years, particularly with all the cluster of planets in Capricorn with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, because Ceres was conjunct those planets as well on January the 12th, 2020, when kind of the world went to pot, if you like. And so I started to really study her in greater detail beyond what I'd read in Demetra George's book, and then I looked at her in my own chart, and I was aware she was there, but I was like, of course I'm interested in Ceres. She's conjunct my ascendant. She's like right there, right at the front, and she's at 2 degrees of Capricorn. And so I kind of feel like I'm meant to master what Ceres is about in some way. And so I just started following her, studying her. Most of my studies are my own work. Of course, I've read what people have said about her, but I've had some what I would call downloads about Ceres myself, which I'm sure we're going to talk about through this interview.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's perfect. Yeah, that's a perfect introduction of how you kind of stumbled upon Ceres. And it's funny you say that because that kind of happened to me too. Because I remember in the beginning of 2020, everybody's talking about the great conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn. But you're absolutely right. Ceres was there in Capricorn with this conjunction. And I did feel like sometimes she was being left out of the interpretation when she's actually a rather very important piece of astrology and the mythology of the planets.
Absolutely. I mean, she was one of the primary goddesses, in mythology, and one of the 12 main gods and goddesses in Rome, the Dei Consentes. And there's just so much to her. She's just about so much, and with she along with Venus are kind of my main topics of interest, and I actually see them as mother and daughter. I kind of see them as Demeter and Persephone. So we've got that whole story going on there. So
Yeah, actually, I know most people are somewhat familiar with the Demeter Persephone mythology, but maybe with your all of your Sagittarius placements, you can kind of tell us a little bit more about that story and how it relates to Ceres, asteroid, dwarf planet.
Well, Ceres was the goddess of the grain and the harvest, and she had a daughter called Persephone, who, she obviously loved very, very much. And short version is Persephone was either kidnapped and raped by Pluto or Hades and taken to the underworld, or she fell in love. And I think there's been a lot of reimagining of that story, that they kind of, it was passion and desire, because the planet Venus does represent desire, earthly kind of desire, and Pluto or Hades is very much about soul desire. So it's kind of the story of loss of innocence and coming to terms with, our humanness, our shadow, our desire self, I think. Anyway, Persephone was kidnapped or ran off with Hades, and Ceres was so distraught in looking for her daughter that she destroyed the harvest. So she's quite the destroyer goddess as well. She's not all love and light as a goddess. She's if she's in pain, she is destructive. But eventually, to cut a long story short, they came to an agreement with Jupiter, the king of the gods, that Persephone would spend 6 months in the light and 6 months in the dark. 6 months with her mother, Demeter or Ceres. They're the same god or goddess in the Greek and Roman pantheon. And 6 months in the underworld with her husband, Hades or Pluto. So it's about balancing, to my mind, the light and the dark and the seasons, and coming to terms with grief and loss and all those themes that Ceres is about. So
Yeah, actually, I love that you brought up the sort of different ways we can tell the story of Ceres or Demeter, because the way Demetra George tells it, for the most part, in her Asteroid Goddesses book, is she kind of tells the story about how Demeter and Persephone are so close as mother and daughter, but Persephone is so beautiful, she has a lot of suitors. But the way, again, Demetra tells the story is like, oh, well, even though Persephone was super beautiful, her and her mom were just so close. So they
mm.
just weren't interested in the suitors. They had everything they needed together in that mother-daughter relationship. And I raised my brow at that part of the story, because I mean, I have a very prominent Ceres in my own chart. And from what I've had in my limited client experience, I've only been seeing astrology clients for about 2 years, but still, people with prominent Ceres, I'm not seeing a lot of like perfect mother-daughter relationships where like you're inseparable and you're just happy being together. So that's the part.
I have quite a challenging relationship with my mother, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And for me, it's like this asteroid really brings up the topic of like psychological separation between mother and daughter. And how many times do we hear the story of like the overly protective mother and then the daughter who falls in love with the bad boy?
Yeah.
And the only way she escapes the mom's protection is to whatever, get on this person's motorcycle or whatever, so I preferred the retelling of the story, which is
Me
like,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
Persephone and Hades actually were getting together.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's something to that psychologically. If I was Persephone's therapist, I would be like,
Yeah, exactly. And I also, I think we also have to take it down to a real psychological level, that the gods and goddess myths, all the myths are parts of the self. So it's all about kind of loss of innocence and separation with that mother archetype, and then becoming the mother yourself. There's all kinds of themes as well. So, we can't just say it's just about this. The patriarchy, the patriarchy as a system, our telling of myths is very separatist, and this is that and that's that. It's all kind of blended in, really. So
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And Louise, what have you found to be, in your series experience with your own series archetype in your life and, you know, kind of observing this archetype in your clients' charts too? Of course, there's the mother-daughter dynamic that we were just talking about, but what are some other themes that you've seen Ceres bring up in the natal chart?
Well, it's definitely what nourishes us, what feeds our soul, and it's in all ways. What nourishes us physically, what nourishes us spiritually, and mentally. Ceres is very much about nourishment, and I love that word for her. For example, my own Ceres in Capricorn in the first. I'm constantly working and learning and trying to achieve things, not so much in a money way, but just in a mastery type of way, and that's been very much a big theme of my life all the way around. It's and to become the expert on something, like I can see this series research coming into a book for me, you know.
Mm.
So it's kind of got that element. So wherever Ceres is in your chart, of course, you have to look at the house and the sign. It's basically what nourishes your soul, so, to my mind.
Ooh, totally. It's funny
Yeah.
because Ceres in my chart squares my nodes. So I feel like I have quite a karmic thing going on with
Yeah.
Ceres, and even just the topic of nourishing has just God, like that's a loaded topic for me, partially, neither of my parents modeled what it was to be nourishing to oneself. Very little self-compassion was modeled to me. So I think that's a series theme too. Like
Yeah.
maybe just like the ability to love yourself, the ability to nurture oneself. And that all goes back to the archetypal mother, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like your mom is psychologically and physically the first person you have contact with on the
Yeah.
human plane. Um, and I think it's Demetra George who talks about like breastfeeding and like how Ceres can kind of have to do with that first contact
Yeah.
between infant and child. So
Well, I
again,
have a great story about that if you want to know.
oh, I would
Well,
love that. I
well,
would.
I'm the eldest of four and the only girl. And interesting that my series is in Capricorn in the first house. And my mum said she tried breastfeeding and hated it, and it was like, ugh, disgusting. And but to look at the other side of series as you develop it in your own chart. When I had my own children, I breastfed long term. I did my eldest for a year and my youngest for 4.5 years at night till just before she started school. I was determined that I was going to be the nourishing attachment mother that I had not had. So,
Wow, yeah, that's incredible. I
yeah.
bet I actually think it's funny. We would have to do some more breastfeeding research, but I
Mm.
would I would put money on the fact that like people with prominent series in their charts have some kind of story like that. Um, Maybe, like you said, mom didn't want to breastfeed, or maybe mom couldn't breastfeed for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
I know that can actually bring up a lot of shame for a lot of mothers, like
It
kind of,
can, yeah. But my mum just didn't like it. So yeah,
yeah.
just couldn't do it. And then she also, was not huggy at all. Never hugged me. And I once asked, why didn't you hug me when I was little? And she said, you didn't want to be hugged. And I was like, what? You were the mum. But anyway, she's still alive. Hi, mum. I'm over it now. But
Yeah.
but again, I made sure I hugged my kids all the time. It's and a Capricorn, of course, can be that quite that walled off kind of blocked kind of energy. So yeah,
Yeah, totally. I can definitely see that. Also, that kind of reminds me of a story, and share it very vaguely because it does come from a client. But um, for various reasons, while she was gestating, like in her mom's womb as a fetus, her mother was in mourning. Um,
Wow.
and she has Ceres in a very prominent place in her chart.
Mm.
And I thought that was so Ceres, like this topic of mourning too, that comes
Oh,
in.
very much grief, mourning. Yeah. I
Yeah.
should actually look at my eldest daughter's series. I've never actually looked at her chart with that because when she was in gestation, my dad was dying. So
Wow.
he died a month before she was born. So
Wow. And do you, for you, going back to the mythology of Ceres, do you relate that with like Ceres or Demeter having to kind of mourn the loss of her daughter? Like, where does that mourning or that death thing come in with the story?
well, I think yeah. I mean, in the myth, it comes in through the loss of Persephone, but I think it's also about the loss of innocence, which is why she kind of raged and killed the harvest, and then went off to Elusia to find direct experience of God. I think Ceres is at a more at a more overview level is about the loss of our connection with the cycles of nature and birth and death of all things, not just her daughter. That's just a symbolic theme of it. So,
Oh, totally, totally. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I've been really sitting on that very topic like for a couple
mm,
months, like like why do I get so depressed and sad during the transitions between summer and fall, and that
mm,
transition is really hard for me. And actually it's been a lot better this year. I'm completely fine for the first time in like a million years in that transition between summer to fall, but it came with that realization of like I'm really not in tune with the grief, or like I'm not in tune with my own grief over the seasons, and like
mm,
I'm not in tune with what's coming to an end in my life, and all of that resistance was creating a lot of mixed emotions with these seasonal transitions. And but the higher frequency of Ceres is very, very much in tune with the seasonal transitions.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think I imagine Ceres being able to find, even in the dead of winter, she goes out and like finds bark that has medicinal properties, or she goes and discovers the one winter berry. Like she's able to harvest no matter what, if that makes any sense to you, Louise.
Oh, it makes complete sense. And, I always think I'm the best example because I have such a prominent series. For anybody watching, series is stationing retrograde in 2 days' time from this interview, exactly conjunct my moon, and 12 degrees of Gemini in the you can't make this stuff up department. And I have had this big awakening to having to grow food and get in tune with the land and things and those cycles. And instead of just diving in and just doing it the very, digging up a load of stuff, I'm preparing long term. So that's a winter thing for series for me. I'm researching no dig vegetable beds, preparing them over winter, and I'm preparing this vegetable bed with all the layers of harvest to nurture the soil so it can grow vegetables next year. And this is so unlike me. I'm not a gardener, so I'm clearly mastering series in some way.
Yes, I love, yeah, no, literally planting a home garden, you're connected
Yeah,
to Ceres. And
yeah,
building a relationship with the earth when
mm,
everything in our modern day society says you don't have to build a relationship with earth anymore.
yeah,
You can get strawberries
365 days a
Yeah,
year. Um,
exactly.
so it is quite, um, I think it's quite revolutionary to build a relationship with Earth this at this point. Have you ever found that Ceres has anything to do with people who have grown up in like agricultural families, or did you yourself ever grow up like, I don't know, growing your own vegetables or anything like that?
I haven't noticed that, but that's an interesting thought. Nobody in my family really did that ever, but then that's that kind of walled off first house Capricorn thing, I think. So it's up for me to discover it. So, and it's actually stationing retrograde in my sixth house, which is very much about being wholesome and holistic. So I'm
Yeah,
learning it. Yeah, I'm learning it now. I haven't noticed that in charts, but then I don't think I get many clients who come from that kind of background. So
we need to go visit some farms and check some
I
farm
know.
charts or something.
I know. I really need to do some deeper research in other people's charts now that I've finished a book project I was writing. So,
Um,
yeah.
and I know, Louise, you're like particularly, I know we're kind of discussing Ceres in the natal chart, but I know you're also particularly interested with
Mm.
your own research about Ceres like in history.
Mm.
And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about when this asteroid was discovered or really anything when it comes to how you see the themes of Ceres
Yeah.
playing out historically, because I think that would be fascinating.
Well, my big overarching opinion is that the discovery of the asteroids and now the dwarf planets is a big thing that's launching us into the new paradigm that will be the age of Aquarius whenever that starts. I'm not going to get into that. But Ceres was discovered on January the 1st, 1801, and she was asteroid number one. And on her discovery, that was right in the middle of the industrial age, and it's become clear that the industrial age has accelerated climate change to a great degree. What we are doing with the earth and the pollution that we're causing, and not that I'm suggesting we go back to living in caves, at all. But I think Ceres is teaching us about the damage we've done, talking about her as a destroyer goddess. We're having the bigger and bigger hurricanes, the bigger and bigger tornado storms, and all the weird climate stuff that we're having. I really attribute that to a lot to Ceres. This of course no planet works alone, but we'll talk about Ceres for now. But then in after Eris, the big shit stirrer, if you don't mind me saying shit on your podcast, when she was discovered in 2005 and then classified as a dwarf planet in 2006, Ceres was promoted to, or reclassified, I prefer, because I don't see them as promotion or demotion. She was reclassified as a dwarf planet. So, since she was discovered in 1801 by humans, that would, to my mind, makes her dwarf planet number one, as well as asteroid number one. And then that meant Pluto was also reclassified as a dwarf planet, and now we've got all these dwarf planets being discovered. Um, Sedna is another one. Her orbit is 10,400 years, which takes us back to the end of the last ice age. So I really think that all this dwarf planet stuff, starting with Ceres, is to do with climate change, and Ceres being dwarf planet and asteroid number one is a big part in that story, with her discovery and the fact that she's actually inside the asteroid belt. I see her as a personal planet, to be honest. So she's a part of us that has to learn to live in a more equitable way with the earth and to nourish the earth and allow the earth to nourish us and not have this theme of that we control everything, and that we can just throw our toxic waste in rivers and things like that. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That makes sense to me on so many levels. And it's funny because when I think about the Industrial Revolution, and I think of like a chapter in one of my history books in elementary school or middle school, and I remember like child labor became a really horrible theme that went along with the Industrial Revolution. And even in that sort of sense of child labor, the premature separation of mother and child, or the parent not being able to nurture their own child because they have to go to work,
yeah.
and all of this stuff.
And now all our kids are farmed out to childcare, and when we don't have any community, we're very separate as families. Yeah.
Yeah, and I tend to be a little bit of an anarchist, and like sometimes I just sit and I think about like school is so dumb sometimes. Like it's dumb. Like really, you're gonna make a kid go to learn all of this stuff that they don't even need to know for
With
6
this, I know, with this obsession with, like grades and achievement, and just sit in this place all day, every day.
Yeah.
School's rubbish. It's probably one of the worst things they did to children, to put
It
them.
is, Louis. Thank you. Yeah, and it's not that I don't value education, because obviously
No.
I do, and obviously you do too. But like school, I think its primary, its primary sort of goal is to just give kids somewhere to go while their parents go into the workforce. And
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
it's just another part of how we all participate in the capitalistic agenda. So yeah, I think wow, this is really blowing my mind that Ceres could be speaking to these themes of
I
how,
think it did. Yeah.
yeah, like how many things in our daily life just disrupt our natural cycles of being human.
Yeah, absolutely. And that all comes back to that part of that conjunction in January the 12th, 2020, with her being there in Capricorn, which is really representing the rules and structures we've set up as capitalist society. And it's being destroyed. We've seen it in the pandemic. A lot of kids had to be homeschooled and things, and now they're trying to get them back into these structures again, but it's not really working. And I think it's time to rethink it all, personally, everything. But
Yep. Um,
destroy
yeah.
capitalism. Well, unfettered capitalism. I'm not. Yeah.
Hot take. Ceres is helping us destroy capitalism somehow.
At least the unfettered capitalism that's caused so many problems. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? I think the Industrial Revolution, relating to Ceres in a different way, when it comes to our relationship with food, I actually believe I don't think anybody, at least in like the 21st century Western world, actually has a good relationship with food. I mean, granted, we're privileged in the sense that we don't experience, necessarily as much scarcity as other places in this world, although there is food scarcity in America, which is another issue. But we have these things called food deserts and all of that kind of shit, which is also capitalism. But I'm thinking about how our collective relationship with food is so messed up. I don't think anybody actually knows how to feed themselves or nourish themselves.
Or grow food, and most people will eat meat but would be horrified at the thought of like killing an animal for food, or skinning and gutting it, myself included. I wouldn't, the thought of gutting an animal is not not top on my agenda, but we've lost that connection with the food and pulling a carrot out of the ground. I remember actually somebody in my family must have grown some food, because I do remember pulling carrots out of the ground and just the freshness of them and stuff when I was young. And I think we need to rediscover some of that, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Ceres is telling us that. So, in my opinion,
totally.
yeah.
What do you think now, kind of with this, the Industrial Revolution perspective of like, when did Ceres come to us, and what is she trying to teach us now, with her kind of participating in the Great Conjunction at the beginning of 2020? Where do you see like the journey of Ceres taking us in the next couple years? I don't know if that's too big of a question, but
Well, a few things, but I really do see a lot of people starting to grow food and on more kind of community gardens and more interest in regenerative farming rather than just this industrial farming, all those kind of themes. I do see it developing a lot. People are realizing that we're just destroying the land that nourishes us with industrial farming. So I think regenerative farming is a big one. Community farming, a lot of people turning yards over to gardening. There's been a few projects I've seen just locally. I tried to become a part of one where they got everybody together, and those that were fit and able to dig up the ground would go and dig, and people would donate land. Nothing much came to it, but people are trying to develop these things, and a lot of these people do a lot of it where it kind of they donate some food to those who are not able to do it. So it's more community oriented. And that's a lot to do with that Gemini North Node that we've had, where Ceres is now stationing retrograde, local community stuff instead. So Ceres is definitely bringing that. But I also think she's, and it's another topic we said we'd talk about, her relationship to plant medicine and things. I think she's bringing a lot more of that in, but there's particularly in her relationship to psychedelics, to mushrooms. Yay, a great one, another favorite topic of mine. Because mushrooms and humans share a vast amount of DNA. Did you know that?
yeah, actually, I just learned that from someone who was reading some fungi dictionary or something, and I had no idea how smart mushrooms actually are.
They are huge. And Paul Stamets, if anybody wants to read about mushrooms, go and read Paul Stamets' stuff. Because they are just very human, fungi are, and Ceres herself is very connected to that, because in her grief she is said to have gone to Eleusia, and the Eleusinian mysteries are fascinating. There's a couple of books called The Road to Eleusia, and there's another book called The Immortality Key. And this is what it basically is that the Eleusinian mysteries were direct experience of God, or the divine, whatever that is, with no intermediary, back to capitalist religion, priests, and all that kind of stuff. And the Eucharist, the body and blood, it was actually originally kind of psychedelia. And we can see that on the rise with psychedelics being microdosing, being used for mental health treatment, and the such. But I also think there's a move. I think religion as an institution is starting to die with the intermediary kind of thing, and people are realizing they can have direct experience of whatever the divine is. Not necessarily just from taking psychedelics, but from interacting with nature. That is kind of the divine, And of course, that was all shut down. And the Immortality Key is really interesting on that book. about how psychedelics showed up in culture after culture and were shut down by the church, or the churches over the centuries, just not allowed because, you need us to connect. You need the patriarchal father to connect. And that takes me to a story about the Mormon church here in Utah, where I live. The missionaries came to talk to my daughter because she invited them in. Oh, you never do that. And she was quite young, so there was 2 young missionaries and their local bishop that came into our house, and I stood there in the background being the protective mother, Ceres. Okay. And they were teaching her all their stuff about why she should join the church, really, I guess. And I always like to challenge them. So I was like, you keep talking about the Heavenly Father. What about the Heavenly Mother? Where's she in all this? And they said she is so precious and so meaningful that she's been kept in, guarded by the Heavenly Father. And so we can't see her ourselves because the Heavenly Father is looking after her. And this awareness just came to me over the last week with Ceres stationing retrograde on my chart, that Ceres has been there hiding in plain sight inside the asteroid belt, with Mars and Ceres, our 2 outer personal planets. Mars in the Roman pantheon was seen as guardian of agriculture, and Ceres is goddess of the grain. Mars was seen as the father, Ceres as the great mother. So Mars has been blocking our view, kind of thing, of Ceres, but now we know she's there, so we can bring in equality again. We can bring in both the divine feminine, the great mother, and the divine heavenly father, whatever you want to call it. Not in religious terms for me, but you get the idea.
Right. And
Yeah.
how fascinating is it that Ceres is going to station retrograde as Mars is combust the sun? So we actually can't see Mars right now. So it's like Ceres really has maybe a message for us for some reason during this time.
And they are in aspect to each other as well. They're in, it's all
right. Good point. Very
they're
good.
in a trine aspect. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What does the actual astrological cycle of Ceres, like how long does it take them to move through a sign?
I cannot remember. I
was like, I can't remember either. I feel like if I were to guess, they would move similarly to Mars's speed, but I could be totally off.
I think she's a bit slower. Yes, she is. She's 4.6 years.
Okay, so
she's further out than Mars.
Than Mars. Okay, so it takes 4.6 years for Ceres to go through all 360 degrees of the zodiac.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's about double Mars's.
About double Mars. Okay, so actually, when Ceres is within a sign, she's there. They're there for a while. They're cooking in a certain part of our charts for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Ceres and Gemini right now as we speak. Ceres and Gemini has been in my 12th house, and talking about some of this like parental kind of separation, and I don't want to say the loss of innocence, but like dating. Like there's been like a lot of those themes about the tension between your parents and your own love life, and that's in my 12th house. So this is really interesting now that I think about it.
Well, it's interesting. She's going through my 6th house and has been for quite some time, and I actually found I had some stuff going on I wanted to process, which is very Mercury, and I got a therapist for the first time in many years. And wow. I see the 6th house as very analytical, so
yeah. And kind of going back to like plant medicine and these Eleusinian mysteries that Ceres can kind of rule over, I'm thinking about how we could also blame the Industrial Revolution for our mental health because of the capitalistic workforce and how we, spend so much of our time working. I mean, it's no wonder why so much of the population has anxiety and depression. For me, it's mostly a manifestation of our disconnection from our own cycles and earth
I,
cycles.
I think so. I
Yeah.
agree, definitely. And, if you look back at history, I guess there's always been kind of the 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 person that was locked in the attic. But then when did it start really? It was perhaps started with the Industrial Revolution. I don't think you hear much about, that kind of um the woman being locked in the attic before then, you know.
Right. Oh yeah, it's a
I'm
good
thinking of all the Victorian things which were after. Yeah.
right, right. It's a good point. And I'm also thinking about how I think even with the pandemic, again, the onset of the pandemic was sort of that the triple conjunction, and then with Ceres in the mix at the beginning of 2020.
Mm.
So many people I know started going to therapy during the pandemic, or even went on medication, or had a very difficult or challenging realization about their lives that maybe um, also had some mental health kind of heaviness to go along with it. And
Well, a lot of people are leaving the workforce, aren't they? People can't hire restaurants and things where people were treated like crap. Can't find workers because workers are saying, "I'm not going to be treated like crap anymore."
right, right, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it's a moment where we're kind of like, I need to prioritize my mental health. Like, I can't go on like this. Is life really about doing this, or is life about something else? And that kind of relates to kind of Ceres and the Eleusinian mysteries and being one with God.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm also thinking about how and I'm open that I'm on Prozac, so I take an SSRI, and it's really helped me. It's been very beneficial to me, but I know, I think all psychiatrists would agree with me that it is overprescribed.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of psychiatric medications that are, yeah, overprescribed. And what do they say? 1 in 5 Americans are on some kind of SSRI. And that just seems
Cope. Yeah, I know. It's
like
insane. And I have been in the past. I'm not currently, but I've taken sertraline. That's the one worked for me. But yeah, it's ridiculous that so many people are just propped up by drugs, basically, because modern life, they can't cope with our lives.
right, right. And like with that series connection to the
Mm.
medicine of plants, not just like psilocybin or something along those lines, but even like hugging a tree.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that
exactly.
that's medicine, I think, at times. And that's just medicine we don't get in our daily lives. So perhaps this is also one of our series kind of callings at the moment.
I really think it is, to get out and get your bare feet on the grass even for 10 minutes in the day if you can, or I'm always I have a membership community, and I do them most videos, short videos most days, and I'm always saying, just get out and just go and touch some nature, go and, you know, just for a little while.
Yeah, yeah. What
Yeah.
um I have a question that's maybe going back to like the theme of Ceres and the relationship with the mother, but what would you say, with someone, either for with yourself or just for someone who does, let's say, have a prominent Ceres in their chart and does struggle with that like parent child relationship? Like, what does Ceres show us about, healing that? Or how has Ceres helped you maybe heal some of those mother wounds within yourself?
I think it's to put myself first and to mother myself first and make self care and self love a priority. The more I've done that, the more the rest of it doesn't kind of matter. I'm not putting it onto somebody else, you know. I'm a strong believer that, you know, my mother did the best she could with what she'd been dealt with in life, you know. And I think we all do the best we can, and we can't rely on anybody else to kind of fix us. So I think self-care and self-love, self-nourishment is the best healing for any serious wounds, personally, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I thought a lot about, I agree with that. I feel like that's brought me some healing with some Ceres stuff in my own chart. I'll also say that I think Ceres may have something to do with the actual impetus behind why we choose to have children in the first place. And I think that oftentimes, especially women or those of us who are conditioned to be women, um, you know, I think we're conditioned to think like, oh, I have to get married and I have to have kids. And this is just part of what I have to do because this is what society expects from me. And
mm-hmm.
sometimes I think people have children because it's just part of the societal dance that they're doing. And I'm not sure if it actually comes from a place of true soul alignment. And I think another reason I think we have children at times is because we did not get the love that we needed from our parents, and now subconsciously we might bring a child into this world to give us that love, but
Yeah,
that's not cool either. So I don't know, this is something I'm noticing with my generation not really being so keen on having children. A lot of us,
yeah,
I mean, it might be because, and I'm not saying this is all parents, but there's something about aligned parenthood with Ceres. Like, why are you bringing this child into the world? Is it because you need love, or you're fulfilling a societal role, or
yeah,
do you genuinely want to be the sort of, could we call it like the soul mentor of this other soul that needs your help to fulfill their mission in this life? You know, that feels like a pretty aligned reason to become a parent, but not everybody will have children with that reason in mind, you know?
yeah. And that's a huge topic. And you know, I like to think I had children older, and I really did think about it, and I wanted to be the loving parent, you know, and kind of raise really healthy adults. And I didn't expect, I didn't do it to be given love. I don't think, though it's nice to get it back. But I wanted to shower love all over my children. So, and I remember people saying to me, "This is, you know, you're surprising as a mother. You just love your children." And I'm like, "Of course I do." You know? And I want them to raise them to be their own people. I kind of wanted to be the wise elder because I was in Capricorn. But I agree, you know, I should, that should be a part of, you know, I'm going to have to re-listen to this whole interview because I really feel a book on Ceres is coming for me at some point. And I think I might have to interview parents about, you know, what went into their thought process about having or not having children. And that would be include men as well, not just um, the females, because men have mothering instincts too, and all, you know, all the genders do. So that's an interesting topic. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I have several friends and family who choose not to have children, and yeah, and I think part of that, some of them, a lot of your generation particularly, is because why would I want to raise children in this world too? To go back to the climate change and the problems that we're having.
Totally.
That series too.
I also like the
I
idea that Ceres amongst all genders can help us find the mother archetype and within ourselves and
Yeah.
kind of ungendering the mother. I don't know, that feels
Oh,
good to me. I don't know if that feels good to everybody, but
oh, it feels very good to me because, a lot of men have got more mothering instincts than so-called than those that identify as women even. Um, my cousin, when she got married, her husband was a house husband because she liked to work and he liked to be in the home with the kids. So, you know, and then there's all the genders in between. But yeah, you've seen my second book, haven't you? That's trying to degender the language of astrology. So I'm um very keen on that. So I don't see Ceres as just women. I see her as the mothering instinct for sure.
totally. And it also, um, I've seen some people in the astrological community even challenge the term asteroid goddesses. And I don't particularly have an issue with it, but I think I can see why asteroid goddesses. It's a very gendered
It
phrase.
is.
And is there another thing we could call Ceres, Juno, Vesta, and Pallas Athena? Could we call them something different so it could be more accessible? I don't know. It could be something to think about.
I know, and I even go as far as to think, well, all the planets and asteroids and dwarf planets, they're just rocks. We're the ones that have gendered them. Not really gendered. Mars has water on it. It's got its yin side as well as its yang.
Right. They're all just rocks. Yeah, good point.
Well, they are. Or gas.
Totally.
And all the gods and goddesses that we've named all these things after were just named from our perspective. So.
Actually, I was going to say, do you have any last series musings that you want to share with us?
Well, I don't really know what it means yet, and I think we'll discover it nearer the time. But I talked about the whole Venus-Pluto series dance. The three of them are meeting at 0 degrees of Aquarius on December the 7th, 2024,
Mm.
which is the exact same degree as the Great Conjunction of December the 21st, 2020, which has launched a whole period of air great conjunctions and the age of air. I kind of think that might be when the age of Aquarius really kicks in. And just the three of them, the lover, the daughter, the mother, all meeting at 0 Aquarius. What healing is that going to bring? I think it's going to bring amazing opportunity for healing and bringing together all of these stories that we've talked about.
I was gonna say, because we're kind of in for maybe another slightly rough year with the astrology of 2022. It's not really until 23, 24 where we kind of see things clearing up a little bit. So that makes a lot of intuitive sense to me, like that kind of.
And that's perhaps when we'll really start to bring in, because Aquarius is new inventions, and we'll bring in more clean energy options and more direct connection with whatever the divine is, which Aquarius really is seeing the big patterns. I see the divine as the astrology, really. So we have to listen to the message of the astrology. So music
Yeah.
of the music of the spheres. So.
Yeah, totally. Well, Louise, you taught me so much about Ceres today, and I knew you were the one to be our Ceres sort of mystic on this episode. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit more about your books or any offerings you have going on at the moment? I'll have everything linked in the show notes, but
I've
yeah.
got my books here. I've just finished writing my third book, which is about using astrology for the tarot. But my first book was Modern Astrology. which I like. I love both my books, but this is the one I really love. This is actually #1 on Amazon.com bestseller. This is the one that asks us to use different language in astrology to degender the astrology a little bit. And what else am I? Oh, my Venus retrograde class. I said that Venus and Ceres are my main topics of interest, and I started doing a Venus retrograde heroine's journey class. I started in 2017. I woke up one morning having had a dream saying, you are going to do this Venus retrograde class. And I've done it every Venus retrograde since. That starts on December the 14th because Venus is going retrograde in Capricorn, conjunct Pluto, Ceres. This Venus retrograde is going to be off the charts, and I'm so excited. I get so excited when my Venus retrograde class is coming up. I'm a shamanic practitioner too. In the class, I do a lot of shamanic journey work and soul retrieval and all kinds of shamanic work at a group level, and it's just the most amazing, transformative class ever. And there's an option to upgrade for a one-on-one session to look at your personal Venus star point. I'm actually certified in Ariel Gutman's Venus star point work, which adds a whole nother level to your astrology. So
Yeah.
so come and sign up for my class. Come and join me. It's amazing.
I actually, like, I'm serious. I'm gonna check my schedule. I might join your class because I actually have a Venus in Capricorn, and Venus will station, or that Venus Pluto conjunction's at like 25 Capricorn, and
it is, yeah.
And that's my descendant. So this I know is going to be big for me. So I might hop into this class.
Yeah, come on. Calls are on Wednesdays. We've got 8 calls. It's a 7-week journey. I'll talk about all that in the class. It's journey into the wilderness, really. It's like the 40 days and 40 nights of many kind of vision quest journeys. So it's a vision quest.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Louise. And I'll have all of Louise's info, her YouTube, Instagram, all her social media down in the show notes if you want to check her out and follow her on YouTube and social media. And I'm sure we'll have to have you back.
I'll send you the Venus retrograde.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'd love to come back on. This was great. I can tell you, Mallory just added so much to my series research as well. So
Awesome. I love it. Well, thanks, Louise.